Is sharing. Hopefully you can see my screen. Let's get started. So this third section of the course is on argument. The assignment is going to ask you to create an argument and then communicate that argument through two texts. You'll need to choose two different audiences for those texts and two different genres. And so we'll get into what all that looks like. The perhaps most exciting thing about this is it is not an essay. It does not even have to necessarily be purely a text. There's a lot of different things you can do with this, and you'll be able to leverage any genre skills you may have already. And so, yeah, let's get into it. So, Unit 3, you see here, what do you want to change on your campus or in your community? Who do you need to convince? How can you reach them through your writing? How can you reach them through a primarily visual, audio, or performative media? How could A-State students initiate the changes they want to see on their campus, in their community, and in the world at large? So this is, in a nutshell, what this assignment is. So you're going to be focused on problems in your community or perhaps A-State, if that's what you want to do, or you could do other types of communities that you're a part of. And this is the primary focus. It's easy to get caught up in the problems of the day. There's a lot of big political discourse. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about things that would make the world sort of as a whole a better place. We really want to set a lot of that aside and ask, what is happening in my communities and what can I do about it? So let's say that you have really strong opinions about poverty. You feel really strongly about um, we should be doing more on the economic side of things to alleviate, poverty. We see a lot of stuff going on, especially right now, of disenfranchised people having a tough time. Um, you don't want to look at this project through how am I going to solve global poverty, but rather who could I convince here in Jonesboro, Arkansas, that would make impoverished people's lives just a little bit better, right? You want to think kind of small scale, because that's where you can really make change. That's where you can really make things happen. Real change is going to happen through grassroots. And so that's what this project is meant to do, is get you involved in thinking about actual change, not just having vague opinions about issues, but rather taking what you care about and channeling the urgency of your caring about things into actual, meaningful, actionable activity. So the third unit, it's going to combine all the skills we learned so far. So you're going to look inward, like when we did narrative, and you're going to reflect on what do you care about, what matters to you personally. And then we're really going to build on the second unit. So all of that analysis that we learned, all of that, discussion of audience, of rhetorical appeals, you're going to put all of that into practice. So in a lot of ways, rhetorical analysis section is introducing you to this toolbox and having you analyze how other entities like advertiser are using those tools on audiences. Unit 3 is then you are the rhetor. You are applying those tools. It's you choosing ethos, pathos, logos, making use of kairos to convey your ideas. And so in a lot of ways, this unit is a continuation of what we were just doing. So hopefully all that is still fresh. You'll be putting it to use immediately. Um, on top of that, there's a research element. So you're going to be investigating, um, as it says here, what's already been said about the issue, as well as finding evidence to support your ideas. This is going to be sort of a um, stepping stone toward what you're going to do in Comp 2. Comp 2 is a class that's dedicated to a research project. You're going to be doing a lot of research in there. So here's going to sort of be a chance to sharpen up some of your basic research skills before move on to the bigger class. Um, so here's a breakdown of what this process is going to look like. There's an example here. If you're interested in changing how rushing works, that the timeline, maybe the timeline is it's too quick or something, doesn't give the chance for people to really make a good impression. Um, the research might be contacting the director of Greek life. We're really interested in getting you guys interacting with the world. Crazy. Um, Hopefully that's not horrifying. And so being able to track down who can I talk to get the information that I need, especially if you're doing A-state stuff. Um, it's a really, really great way of developing some skills like interviewing skills. And interviews don't have to mean sitting down one on one with someone for an hour and talking podcast style with somebody. It might mean a simple email with a couple questions, reaching out of, hey, I've got these three questions. If you have a couple minutes for really brief answers, um, that can be an interview. And so this is really what we want you guys to focus on is grounded, not just Googling things and uh, uh, getting random data from random places, but rather being really intentional about who you're talking to, where you're getting your information from, and making sure that evidence is locally derived. Um, if you're doing stuff on how many instead of how many people in the US are on food stamps, it might be how many people in Northeast Arkansas are on food stamps or something like that. And maybe calling up or emailing the local human resource office to get those numbers or something like that. Right. Uh, well, a student who wants to raise awareness on campus about the waste accumulated by our use of disposable straws would start online or with university databases. Um, So these are the sorts of projects, sorts of ideas, sorts of types of research you might be doing. Um, really want to consider your purpose. You'll want to figure that out really early on. What are you trying to do here? You don't want to choose something and think, I don't like X. I'm going to advocate against X. You want to go a couple steps further than that. Like it's okay to have this opinion of like, I don't, care for this thing. I think this thing is harmful or whatever. Um, but you want to think like, what are alternatives? Why is that system the way that it is? How did it get to be there? The people putting these systems into place are generally not morons. They're usually making the most of what is available to them. So the question is, what led them to put that into place? And what are the alternatives? What do those look like? Are they viable? Are they cost efficient? Things like that. So you really want to consider your purpose and um, consider all of the angles. So I highly, highly recommend not choosing something that you are deeply entrenched in your opinion about. You don't want to choose things that uh, your um, kind of emotional self is very entangled with things that, opinions you've held since you were 8 years old that, you feel really, really strongly about the type of thing that if you were to be challenged on that opinion, you would be very upset by that. Like if someone believed something different than what you believe, if you found that absurd or frustrating, maybe that's not the type of thing to spend your time researching. We want to avoid bias. We really want to be able to go into these projects with a relatively open mind. Um, we still want to be in a place where we want to make an argument, right? You can go into something too open of a mind, and then that might make it impossible to ultimately make an argument. So you definitely want to care about it. I get a lot of um, projects on how to improve the food in the cafeteria, stuff like that. So no one's going to have extremely, extremely strong, emotionally entangled opinions about the food in the calf. It's just not that type of a topic. So these are the types of topics generally you want to do. You want to kind of avoid the really emotionally heavy topics and instead focus on what are things that would improve, the daily lives of people, um, rather than what is going to change the fabric of our society, right? That's not necessarily the type of project you're going to be able to complete in, 4 weeks. If you do want to do a project like that, that's great, but let's work together. Like, let's work on that. Let me know what you're thinking and let me help you kind of refine those ideas. Because you want this to be as professional as possible, as impactful as possible. So, yeah, one thing you can do is raise awareness. This is something that a lot of students don't realize is that it's sufficient to just point out the problem. You don't have to solve the problem. In fact, I recommend most not approach this project as attempting to solve a problem. You really can't. You're a freshman, sophomore, most likely. You don't have that power. You don't have that sway. You don't have that clout. What you do have are tools and genres available to you to get ideas to people who do have the sway. And we do that through raising awareness. We do that through pointing out perspectives on things by saying, hey, this thing that you don't see as a problem because the way you're looking at it, let me introduce you to another way of looking at this that would help you see how much of a problem it is for, this community. And then they say, oh, I never thought of it that way. No one had ever exposed me to that way of looking, that perspective. This is important. I do see now that change is needed. And then they set about using the resources available to them to bring about change. And so it's really what you want to be thinking is rather than climbing the mountain of solving a problem, ask who can I nudge that's already at the top? Who can I nudge that is already in a position to solve this problem, already has all the resources? They're just not mobilizing those resources the way I think that they should. That's who you target with this. So again, it might just be raising awareness. Um, most of modern politics, most of modern discourse runs on this. Talking points, just getting information out to people shifts their awareness, shifts their attitudes, and that kind of snowballs into action. So, are you wanting to, add things in this example, curriculums, programming, change policies or practices? And then who are you trying to convince? Students? Are you trying to raise awareness for students? Are you trying to mobilize a particular group of students? This is really where we start cooking, is identifying particular groups, getting awareness to them, because then they can coordinate. More tight-knit communities, more tight-knit groups are better at coordinating. And so the more focused you are, the more focused you can make them. Administration, the community that you're writing and working on behalf of, business owners, all of these are fair game. And then once you make that decision, that's going to guide your choices. And so this is really the trick of it is making choices, and then each choice you make is going to limit you, but in an interesting way, not in a way that you're losing freedom, but rather your choices should do the work for you, right? If you choose students, that's going to immediately key you into what genres would work on students. If you choose admin, that's going to key you into what genre is going to work on admin. And again, you want to use your intuition here. Students, social media, admin, letters, there's or social media, but different types of social media posts. Um, the way that if you were trying to make a post for boomers, you may target like trying to make something go viral on Facebook versus if you're targeting, um, people of your own generation, maybe TikTok, maybe something else. And so that's what you want to be thinking about is once you make those decisions, what genres are available to you to reach those audiences. And then here are a number of examples. You can do anything here. You could do an interpretive dance if you wanted. I do not care what you choose to do. I want you to leverage your skills. You're coming into this class already knowing how to communicate. Um, in college, we teach you how to communicate a certain way through academic essays and stuff like that. But you already have communication skills. And so this is called horizontal transfer, where you can take skill sets you have horizontally in other domains of your life and then feed those into a new, sector. And so, yeah, dude, if you are an influencer, leverage that. If you are an artist, leverage that. What skills do you have that will make this make your work more effective? There does need to be a textual component to all of these. So if you do a interpretive dance, you'll need a short write-up of that contextualizes that keys an audience into what they are looking at. Um, so there is a little bit of text to all of these, but a lot of them, you could do a brochure. I've had a lot of students do brochures. If they think more students need to visit the local museum, we have a museum on campus. They think a lot more students need to come visit it. They make a brochure advertising for the museum. I've had people do tons of people do social media campaigns. If you do a social media campaign, you need to do 3 posts minimum. Um, and you can post those on your actual page and then take them down and just screen cap them. There are other ways of programs you can use for like simulating posts where you can design posts um, without having to actually post anything. But you need to do at least 3 of those. You can write a letter. A lot of students write like open letters, or they'll write a letter to a senator, or they'll write a letter to the provost or the chancellor or something. Those are always great. I had a student write a screenplay. They wrote uh, a screenplay. I think it was, I think it was a one act screen. Maybe it was an episode of something. But anyway, I had a student write a scene. So if you're a creative writer, you can do stuff like that. You could write like a commercial. So you can do absolutely anything that you want as long as it is targeting a specific audience and it is communicating an argument. Right. So you're going to compose 2 different projects aimed at persuading 2 different demographic groups. So if it's a problem on campus, you're trying to say, hey, we should have better food in the caf. You might choose a social media campaign for students saying, hey, you should be angry about the food. You deserve better. And then an open letter written to a state admin saying, hey, you need to do better. We need better food. We're paying a lot of money tuition and you're serving us crap. Do better. Right. And so it's 2 different audiences there. But ultimately, the underlying argument is still the same. Argument being, we should get better food in the calf. This is really a test of how you can adapt a message to different audiences through different genres. It's really what I'm looking at is there a single message showing up in 2 distinct ways for 2 distinct audiences? If you can do that, you will do really well. So, in short, here's what the assignment looks like. First, you're going to identify a problem, uh, either on campus or in your community. I recommend looking on campus. That's going to make this project significantly easier to research, to think your way through. If you do community, it needs to be localized. So not in the sense of it has to be here in Jonesboro, but you need to think really specifically. Community doesn't need to be like everyone who thinks like I think, or everyone who looks like I look, or whatever it might be. It needs to be a very, very specific locale. It needs to be, in your hometown or, that kind of scope. It needs to be very, very localized. Choose something you feel is urgent And urgent doesn't mean end of the world, um, you know, my hair's on fire because of this problem. But urgent in the sense of there's 20 different, excuse me, 20 different things you could spend your time doing this project on. But this is kind of the top of the list. If you kind of think, what is the best, bang for my buck? What change would cause the most change, right? Would lead to the most thriving. Um, and that's what you want to kind of go with. You want to go with something that is the most efficient and effective use of your resources. And so that's what kind of urgency is here, is, what can be fixed quickly, relatively quickly, and is pressing as something that would, upon being fixed, immediately increase the um, quality of life for the community. Um, this is what you want to focus on. Then you're going to compose an argument. This should change over time. So you're going to kind of jot out a basic argument at first. And then as you research, you're going to develop that argument. But you want to kind of have an idea and actually be able to write down, I'm arguing this specifically. And an argument is just a position. You're saying, we should have better food in the cap. It's a claim. And claims can be true or false. Someone can say, it's false. The food is fine. Uh, right. And so it needs to be some sort of claim, a position. And then the important thing is you're going to support that with evidence. So next, you're going to research the issue. You're going to examine the scope of the problem. It's really what you want to figure out is, how deep does this go? How wide does it go? Is it just a problem with the food in the cap, or is it a lot of services are underfunded or are low in quality, right? Is it like a systemic issue? It's really what you're looking for. Is it may start off with, we need better food in the calf, but it may end with, we need better resource allocation. That the university has all of this money, and yet they're not really putting it into anything that's actually helping students. And so you end up identifying the systemic issue, that the food decaf is just the tip of the iceberg, and that there's a deeper issue that people need to be aware of. And so there's a kind of a journalistic angle on this for a lot of projects in the end, where they start researching and then they find kind of these rabbit holes. And so, whatever you identify as your argument at the beginning, it doesn't have to be that at the end. The project can take on a number of different shapes as it goes on. So you're going to examine the scope of your problem, and then you're going to find evidence to support your argument. And this is the most important thing, is you're going to need sources. You're going to need to support your argument with evidence, or you're not going to convince anybody. Now, you don't need pages and pages and pages of, graphs and tables and all of that. But you do need a couple very well chosen, well sourced pieces of information that will ultimately support and your argument and sway your audience. So then you're going to choose your audience. This should actually be plural. Choose audiences by assessing who the stakeholders are. So stakeholders are who is affected by it and who could do something about it. Right. And so those may be your two audiences, or maybe there's multiple groups that can do something about it and you want to reach out to both. Maybe multiple communities or multiple segments of a community are deeply impacted by this and you want to mobilize them. So you might do that. You may do a mix. So you want to figure out who the stakeholders are, be specific, and then choose style your argument in a way to impact them. And then you compose two texts, recognizing your own unique skill set and choosing genres, media, conventions that had the best chance of persuading those two distinct audiences. Um, yeah, pretty self-explanatory there. Yeah, and there's these examples here, but the sky's the limit. Anything that you can convey an argument through, it is a question of content. So obviously some forms are going to have or be more labor intensive than others. So we want it to be a pretty even playing field. So if you do something that's less textually um, intense, like a social media post, right? We will probably need at least three. Those tend to be quite short unless the post is, you got like a essay for the caption or something like that. But then that's probably not what you want to do for that genre. If you do like some like an art piece or something like that, right? It depends on the nature of the art piece. And so I will kind of have a bit of an eye for we don't want to abuse this. We want to, not do what is going to be the minimal amount of labor, but instead just think in terms of what am I good at and how can I bring that to this project? It'll be a lot of fun. A lot of students have a ton of fun with this. Um, yeah, don't just do what's easy, because yeah, you're going to end up having to do the same amount of work as someone writing an essay in the end. Um, so just a note on that. If you're not sure, let's brainstorm together. We can talk about it. PowerPoints are valid. That would go into the like presentation. So if you want to imagine giving like a presentation at a conference, you could do that. If you want to imagine it's like going to a faculty senate meeting and making a plea to the faculty senate for something. Um, So imagine whatever you like. Imagine a world in which you are very bold and you can get out there and do anything that you want. What would you do? If you want to do, a conference style presentation, you're gonna have to go to a conference or anything. If you want to do an interpretive dance, you're not gonna have to get up in front of the class and dance. Um, so there's that. So imagine that you're really doing this, but it's just practice. Right. Well, that's about it. We'll be working through all of these skills and putting together ideas. This will be due, let's see, we'll have it due the last day of class. I'm not exactly sure when that is. Um, it's usually around like December. Let's see, do I have it on my calendar? Yeah, around December 5th should be last day of class. Um, maybe December or maybe December 3rd. We'll figure it out. But it'll be due around the first week of December. Um, yep. If you have any questions, feel free to email me.